What's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to the What's Up, Beautiful People podcast. That is kind of a mouthful.
It is.
Like,
it is a mouthful.
Every time I say it, it's just like rapid fire all the time.
You do a good job.
It's been a fun day. We just got done filming another podcast, and we're just kind of doing them back to back because we live about 40 minutes away from the studio. And so if we can knock out a couple at one time. But the beautiful thing about this part is we get to interview one of my good friends, Scott Sauls, who the name of this podcast is What's Up, Beautiful People. He happened to write a book that came out like the same week as mine called Beautiful People Don't Just Happen. And it's an amazing book. And if you haven't already gotten it, you need to get it. So he lives here in town, and we just were like, hey, man, you want to come on the podcast? And so glad that you made the drive over here.
Thanks. And it's a 5-minute drive.
That's amazing.
From our church, so,
that's so good, man.
Great.
So how you came here to Nashville in 2012? Is that right?
That's right.
That's crazy. So 10 years.
Via New York City.
Wow,
so
man.
Yeah, big change for us about 10 years ago.
That's incredible. I met you in St. Louis because you started a church there a while back. I'm not sure if you started it or you were just pastoring there. But
yeah, it's Riverside Church, which is now pastored by Zach Eswine.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So,
great bunch of people.
It's awesome. And then obviously heard of you, he was at a church in New York City, a guy, little known guy named Tim Keller. You were sort of his right-hand guy, like preaching pastor, lead pastor, and so many of the things that he embodies that people love him for. I see so much in you as well.
The bald head. And
I was mainly referring to the kindness, the empathy, the compassion, the patience, the gentleness, the humility, the wisdom, the measured approach to saying things that matter, not just like vomiting up whatever your ideas are at the moment. It's just, it's refreshing,
Thanks, Steve.
And so super grateful for you and to learn from you today. And if you guys haven't followed him yet on all the social medias, you should do that. He's great. Again, we're going to drop all the links in the description box and the show notes and all that for his book and for how you can get in touch with him and follow him. But man, I was listening to your book on audio. You sent me a copy of it, which was great. And I'm so thankful, but came out.
The title was based on your
exactly. Well, so first off, you Scott wrote one of the endorsements on my book, so I was super grateful for that. And as I was emailing him to ask, like, hey, would you mind? You were like, hey, I've got a book coming out too. And so then you sent that to me, but we were on the road, and so I didn't get it for a while, but I couldn't help myself. I bought the audio book. I'm a huge Audible guy, like listen to like 4 books a week usually on Audible, which is great. But yours was great, and so grateful. So then when we got home, I read through the physical copy of the book as well, and just so good. And then a couple of weeks ago, we walked in, and my son was also reading it, just found it, started reading it, and we were, this is a great message. But you talk about that in the book, just a lot of things that I think people need to hear about. Number one, like having grace for yourself and for others, understanding that everyone's kind of coming at this life thing from a lot of different angles and a lot of different places of trauma and brokenness and fear and rejection. And I mean, I would love to hear what was the inspiration for you to write this book, and what do you want to see come out of it?
Yeah, so the pandemic happened. Starting around January 2020, which was, it just coincided with the time that the publisher and I were trying to figure out a new book concept. This is my 6th published writing project. And it just felt right to zero in on really what has been summarized now as 3 pain points that everybody experiences, whether we're in a pandemic or not. Regret, things that have to do with the guilt and shame and things that we wish we could go back in time and change. And then the second is hurt, which is just really kind of the human experience of living in a world that is broken, that includes disappointment, and that includes betrayal, that includes the way that we betray others, sometimes realizing that we're doing that and sometimes not even realizing how, we can hurt hurt each other without even realizing it. And then the third would be fear, which was a huge, component of the pandemic. But I also think it's part of people's lives all the time. We're always nervous or afraid or losing sleep about kind of hypothetical worst case scenarios of what might happen down the line. And so it really is it's an effort to put something out there to, I guess, help people find categories for those 3 pain points. And I tell a lot of my own story and my own struggles in the midst of writing it. And I don't know, I guess what I'm a Christian pastor. That's where I come from. It's my point of view. Not everybody comes from that point of view, but, I thought, well, if I could put what I would love to communicate to people, in my role, like one of the main roles of a pastor is to encourage people when they're down, and to help lift them out of, hard places, regret, hurt, fear, etc. What would it look like to turn what I'd love to say to everybody that I possibly could into a little book, and that they could carry with them, that they could maybe talk about with others in group settings, or it's dedicated really to people in the help professions, like pastors and counselors and social workers, and as well as like parents and friends who are showing up for other people, and also hopefully it can be a resource that somebody who's navigating the complexities of being human, to just find some categories and maybe feel less alone in those experiences. And so I hope it helps in that way. So but that's what it was all born out of. But the pandemic amplified all of those things for everyone. Right. And I still think we're all still in some ways hungover, even though we're kind of, I think I heard somebody say recently, it's not a pandemic anymore. It's more like an endemic, which I don't even know what that means. But even though we're easing out of a pandemic, I think the world is still pretty hungover from the whole thing.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I mean, we're big proponents of therapy and counseling and things like that. And so we talk about that. We see therapists regularly.
I wonder if we see the same, because mine lives right down the road from you.
Oh, there you go.
Got named Chip Dodd. I don't know if you know who Chip is, but
I do. He's a great dude. Yeah. Whenever we talk to people, a lot of them will say, I've been trying to find a therapist. They're all booked up for like the next 8 months. And it seems like across the board, that's the thing, is like there is this sense that like, wow, okay, so we've just now sort of got through the, okay, we can hunker down and get through this thing. And now we kind of breathe and we realize what actually happened in our life and in our heart. And we have to like deal with that. Yeah. And a lot of people are feeling that to the point that there's really not a lot of therapists or therapy that is available for a while, which is crazy. Right. So I think what you're doing is giving a language to what a lot of people are feeling already and encouraging people like where they are, which is so good. And so
Thank
helpful.
you. I hope so.
Well, and I know, I mean, you've talked a little bit in the book and in certain things I've heard you say and speaking in various places, you kind of went through a pretty big season of depression and anxiety related to that pandemic. Maybe also, I think just personality wise, sometimes you deal with some of that. Yeah. We were just talking to Bob Goff was on our last podcast, and he was talking about how he's Tigger. And that some people are Eeyore, and whenever he said that, it made me think of you talking about how you're Eeyore. Yeah. And so it made me crack up a little bit. Yeah. Because I said, well, we're having Eeyore on here in just a minute.
That's right. That's right. There's a whole chapter on that.
Yeah, and I love that. Talk about what that was like for you, and just how you navigated, how you found your way out of that. If you're still dealing with that, like what are you practicing to help with that? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I am disposed to anxiety. I'm a type A, kind of an alpha personality, and a lot of times anxiety goes along with that as kind of the shadow side. I'm an Enneagram 4, which is sort of the tortured artist personality, where there's this sort of restless creative thing that births a lot of beauty, but also through a lot of angst, right? As a lot of the stories of the various artists over history would say that, a lot of the best creativity comes from places of pain.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the story of my life. I think my best content, my best preaching, my best showing up for people has always been born out of just my own experiences with regret, hurt, and fear in my own life. But yeah, I've been through a couple of very memorable seasons of just being flattened and immobilized by either fear or just depression and just exceeding sorrow. And thankfully, I know there are a lot of people who would say that's the story of my life all the time. And in my experience, it's been seasonal. And I think it's also been something that's been valuable to go through, because one of the things that it does is it helps, if we'll listen to it, if we'll submit to it, it going through those kinds of seasons can help us become more empathetic. It can make us better at showing up for people in their, low points and challenges. Really the genesis of the title of the book is from a quote from a therapist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who says, the most beautiful, remarkable people that I've ever known are the people who've known defeat and known sorrow and known disappointment and have somehow emerged out of those depths. And she says, they have this tender, loving concern. They have this ability to show up and empathize. And then the final sentence of that longer excerpt is, beautiful people do not just happen. In other words, we're formed and actually made better as human beings through oftentimes experiences that we would never wish on ourselves or on anyone else. And that's one of the things that attracts me most to Christianity is that it's one of the most honest, like pure Christianity is, and I'm not talking about like the messed up, politicized
pure Christianity.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about the politicized, messed up versions, that really get in the way of pure Christianity, and that are just bad marketing and untrue marketing for real Christianity, like real biblical, like Jesus-centered Christianity that comes to us from places like the Psalms and all the distress that went into the creation of the Psalms and the life of Christ and all the rest, and the love chapter and all of that it all came to us through just honest experiences of distress by virtue of what it means to be human. Like every book of the Bible, except for maybe one or two, was written by somebody who was either a slave in prison, awaiting their own execution, traumatized people wrote from a place of trauma to give us beauty and hope. And like the hero of the universe, from our belief system, like his life ended, in a devastating way in his early 30s, right? Before the resurrection, of course. But I don't know. There's just some kind of dance between the hard knocks of life and becoming the very best versions of ourselves. Now we can become the worst versions of ourselves through hard knocks too.
Sure.
Like we got a fork in the road every time we experience regret, hurt, fear, any kind of distress. The fork in the road is, are you going to go this way? The way of cynicism, the way of, perpetual victimhood, where it's you against the whole world and the universe isn't fair and all that, which, those kinds of feelings are understandable, but even though those feelings are real, are they true?
Right.
And the other pathway is, the pathway of, how could we be formed through this? Like skin that is scarred is like 3 times as durable as skin that's never been scarred. A bone that's been broken and reset, the doctors would tell us that bone is so much stronger now because it was once broken and then restored, just because of the way that it puts itself back together and creates defense mechanisms so that, to protect from the same injury in the future. And so just even the way that our bodies are made speaks of how our souls are made.
Yeah.
So
That's so good.
I feel like that's so encouraging, because I think it can take a lot of courage to speak about your struggles and speak about pain and suffering. I think it's sometimes easy to maybe shrink back from that and fear that maybe people are not going to understand or accept your journey. And that's something that I think Stephen and I talk a lot about. It's just we've been through some difficult things, and how do you share that in a way that encourages other people that are also going to be going through those challenges? Because life is inevitably going to be painful at times, and there's going to be suffering, and it's unavoidable. But like you said, how do you allow that? How do you allow God to use that in your life to, it's not, I don't know if I like the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
So not true.
That's
right?
Nietzsche.
But it can be.
Right.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
Kelly
Not Kelly
Clarkson.
Clarkson.
It's from Nietzsche.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily true. Like you said, you kind of come to a fork in the road, and it's what are you going to allow God to do in you and through you in that, because you do have a choice to make when you come to that. So
Yeah. And I do think something you said about just the empathy that it produces in you when you suffer yourself, because the sort of caricature of Christianity that I grew up with was like, you got to be the sort of happy-go-lucky cheerleader type, and rah, rah, sis, boom, bah, Jesus is alive.
That's where Tigger needs Eeyore, my friend.
Yeah, exactly right. And I always felt for years and years and years that if I was sad, I was sinning. And like, I would like, if it lasted longer than a couple of minutes, like I would be like, man, I just need to trust Jesus more and like do better and like just believe God more, and I'll have the joy of the Lord or whatever.
Meanwhile, the Bible itself describes Jesus as a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief.
Yeah. Well, and that I think there's a lot of things that sort of you think but until you live through them, you don't know them. And so I had my own moment where my dark night of the soul, I couldn't escape, like my own sense of like despair and depression and brokenness. It was after we brought Lincoln home from China, actually, and we kind of realized like the depths of the special needs that he had that we didn't really know before. And I just sunk into this. I couldn't dig out. You know what I mean? And then I felt
very scary and hopeless too, because they're giving us these diagnoses and like unknowns, and it's just like, this just feels so heavy. And you want to be able to do the very best for your child, and you're realizing like there may be some things I can't help with. And so that, I think that was terrifying for both of us to realize when they were talking about like, you're going to be facing brain surgeries and all of these issues that it puts you in this kind of different place that you've never been before.
You kind of lose yourself. Like you don't really know who you are anymore for a little bit. I would just like come home and like go to sleep, like fall asleep on the couch and not be able to, and I couldn't shake myself out of it. And then finally, like God came through and gave me hope and gave me joy and those things that I know he does.
Sometimes it's walking through the suffering and like seeing God's faithfulness over and over again. Yeah. And that's what eventually can.
And it kind of rescued me from myself. It kind of rescued me from that old, like, just believe better and you'll be happier again, and that lack of ability to empathize with people who do struggle with that comes from not having walked through it. Yeah. And so I think there is something beautiful about what you learn when you do suffer and how you do grow stronger when you suffer. And if you choose to let it shape you in that way.
So here's a really amazing insight about how God has wired human beings. So, my friend Chip Dodd from Murfreesboro, Tennessee, down the road from you guys, he talks about, and his whole therapy philosophy and counseling philosophy is built around getting in touch with what he calls the 8 core human emotions. And among those emotions are sadness, anger, fear, guilt, shame, hurt, basically
all negative.
Basically, those are 7 distressed emotions.
Yeah.
And one more emotion, gladness. Yeah. Those are the 8 emotions that God has given us to feel in the same way that God has given us ears with which to hear, taste buds with which to taste, nerves with which to feel things tactilely. What does that say? I mean, and even like anybody who's listening and has this jaded understanding that Christianity demands that you not be sad, I just beg you to just take a few days and read all 150 prayers that God gave us in the Psalms to be used to pray to him in ways that he wants to be prayed to. Those Psalms do include gladness. That Tigger's there, like Tigger's all over the place.
Wonderful thing about Tigger.
But at the same time, Eeyore's everywhere as well.
Right.
And in one of the chapters, I don't know if I talk about Tigger, but I do talk about Eeyore. And I used to feel a lot of shame just over the way that I'm wired, because I notice the darkness in the world probably more than the average person. I notice, what's gone wrong with the world and with relationships and with like work situations. Like I notice that kind of stuff quicker and in a more amplified way. And I used to just feel a lot of shame about them. Like, why you got to be so negative, Scott? Why you got to... Yeah. And I'm not only negative, like I laugh a lot and I love comedy, and most comedians would tell you too that their comedy comes out of their depression.
Yeah.
So analyze that a little bit, but back to like Eeyore and Tigger, the world needs Tiggers to remind us, especially if we're coming from the understanding that you and I are that Jesus Christ has overcome the world, right? And again, like for your listeners who aren't there, at the very least, whether or not you ever get on board with Christianity, I just want to say loud and clear, real Christianity that comes from the Bible is a lot more honest, a lot more transparent, a lot more fully human than the caricatures and portrayals that are misportrayals, right. In media and also in just some of the ways that churches run, right? Yeah. So Tigger reminds the world that we always live in hope, that the work of God is already here, and there's a lot to be hopeful about, and the future is bright, at least according to the Christian worldview. Like one famous Christian, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, said that death itself is a festival on the road to freedom. And he said that from prison after he got thrown in jail and eventually executed for opposing Hitler as a Christian. Yeah. Okay, but then Eeyore reminds us that we're not there yet. Like this world is hard, and people need the dignity of being empathized with when they dare to have the courage to say, this is not okay. I am not okay. We are not okay. The world is not okay. It's all beautiful and it's all busted up at the same time. And so if we can bring kind of the inner Tigger and the inner Eeyore to the table all the time with everything, we become the most transparent, honest, real, believable people in the world. Yeah. And those are resources that are given to us right there in Scripture and the Christian World and Life View. And for me, it's that's part of why I'm a Christian, is because it enables it gives permission to be completely real about everything. Yeah, about the hard stuff and about the happy stuff. Like you don't need to be ashamed that you're sad, young Stephen, and you don't need to hide your joy either. Right. Bob Goff, a recent guest of yours, right? Who's just a delightful human being who brings so much wonder, to the table, that we can all draft off of too. So I don't know. I just, that both and tension is very attractive to me, and it draws me in. And I think I don't know. I think most folks who want to get in touch with kind of that inner emotional life are going to be drawn to that reality of both. Yeah.
And I love that you navigated so well as a leader, right? Not just as an author, not just as a friend or a person. Like we're in New York, which very different from Nashville in so many ways.
And
I can only
also
imagine.
so very much the same.
Is it? Okay, because
maybe we can talk about that some other time.
This is something I'm so curious about
Yeah.
because, we have a very diverse group of people who follow the Miller fam on YouTube. And I love that we get to have that. Like, it's not all, people from the United States. It's not all people who believe what we believe. And we just get to see the beauty in everything. I mean, that's why we start every vlog with "What's up, beautiful people." That's why the name of this podcast is "What's up, beautiful people." We can see the beauty in all this.
I mean, can I just interject one? Just to affirm what you're saying. Here's another thing that real Christianity, not only lets us do, but demands that we do.
Yeah,
is to see the beauty and the goodness in people who don't believe as we do.
Yeah,
that a Muslim or an agnostic or a Hindu or what have you, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Somebody from another culture than whatever culture we're part of, etc. Somebody who votes differently than we do. You just name all the differences in the universe. Mm-hmm. But Christianity also it starts with every human being is created in the image of God.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No matter what their belief system.
Yeah.
Like, there's truth and beauty that every person, no matter what your belief system or background, is carrying around with you, that can and must be affirmed and celebrated, especially by people who are dialed in to what Christ has brought to the table, right? Because, like, he's even, like, constantly in a society, for instance, that shames and scolds prostitutes. He's always pointing out the dignity, in like, these hurting, trafficked, women who are and like, he's seeing things about their life experience and what got them there, and not just looking at people on the surface,
Right.
and drawing out dignity. I mean, it's alarming, I think, to a lot of us that Jesus is so hard on religious people who go around judging people, and there's actually not a single criticism for every sexually, damaged person that he encounters. There's not a single criticism that he offers in Scripture. And any of the, like, Samaritan woman at the well, woman caught in adultery, this woman in Luke chapter 7, like, he emphasizes drawing out their dignity, and very gently says, hey, if you follow me, there's a pathway for you to wholeness and health and hope and even community. And he's just addressing those loneliness wounds. But I'm sorry to cut you off. But what you said there is so important. And I just didn't. I don't know. I didn't want to forget. I've got to.
Well, that's. I mean, that's
my memory.
That's where I was headed with the question. Is essentially, like, I feel like more than ever, and I think you'd probably agree with me, especially as a leader of a very diverse church, people are more polarized than ever about everything. I mean, literally everything. Like, you can't, there's hardly a middle. Well, I say that. I think more people are probably in the middle.
The middle is afraid to speak up.
But no one talks about it, right?
It's the silent majority, in my opinion. I agree with you on that.
Yeah. And so being a leader who has to lead from the whole spectrum, right, left, and middle. I love that the emphasis that you say things with love, you say things with empathy. You're always looking for the humanity in it, because that's really what's fueling it all anyway, is our trauma, our wounds, our upbringing, or whatever it might be. And I love that, the way you look at people and lead them and love them is not coming from a place of, I know better, so listen to me and do what I say.
I have my moments.
We all do.
I do.
I get that.
Yeah.
But I just think that's something that is a beautiful art form that we could all learn from. And part of what we are trying to do anyway, you'll never hear us talk about politics on our vlog, just because the second we say anything, it's like, boom, it's a hotbed for all kinds of stuff. And that's not what we're about, but we can, where we find that there is the way of Christ for something, we can show that, how we're trying to live that out in a way that hopefully speaks louder than any kind of words that we would have for that. And, just look at our family. Like, it's sort of a walking billboard in some ways, I think, for that lifestyle of wanting to show, you know. We're not like preaching about it or anything like that, but it's pretty cool that people are seeing kind of the message on that. And it looks like you're going to say
Well, I was
something.
just going to say, because he kind of gave our family the motto, where grace guides, we'll go. And that's kind of what we want our family to be about, is just a picture of God's grace through us. Not that we have all the answers or anything like that, but just that God's grace is enough in and through the ups and downs, and in and through the seasons that you find yourself in, or if you're, you know, going through suffering, or like all of that, to have grace for ourselves and grace for others. That's the picture that we want to be able to represent. And so,
well, when you have messed up as badly as I have, and you have messed up as often as I have,
he's got a book full.
I don't think you can like authentically and honestly like say, hey, I've got it right, you know, watch me, you know. But I think you can, like you say, like, be honest about your shortcomings, be honest about your failures, be honest about the ways you have gotten it wrong. And with that sort of sober-minded judgment about yourself, then you kind of can look, if that's me, then it's everybody. And you know, I'm sort of anti-cancel culture, so
thank you.
It feels like what you're saying is like, hey, let's stop trying to cancel everybody.
You're very courageous to put yourself out in the public if you're anti-cancel culture. It's truly like you just say one wrong thing and it gets misinterpreted.
Yeah.
It becomes the whole story of your life these days.
I always say, you know, our wins are sort of written in the sand, and our mess ups are sort of, you know, drilled into the concrete with a jackhammer. And it's sort of discouraging, but I think there are enough people who that's not what they want. You know, they know it's bad for them. They know the outrage is killing them. They know the anger and is, you know, not that those are invalid emotions to feel, but there's a healthy way to express them and work through them, you know?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Like, so I'm on Twitter, and like, you know,
God bless you.
I you know, it's just, you know, like anybody can be on Twitter. Like, so what? Like, that's not like a resume item or anything, but it's interesting. Like, sometimes what I'll do is I'll throw stuff out there that I put up like 2 or 3 years ago that seem to really connect with people. And now you throw the exact same thing out there. Yeah. And within 25 minutes, there's like 100 comments of, that was so triggering, or that was so this, that, or the other. And I can't believe you're saying that this and this and this. And I'm not saying this and this and this, you know? And it's just like,
we've lost the art of nuance.
What would what would expert sociologists say is happening, where like everything is so triggering now, and everything is so offensive, and everything is like elevated to the level, like what used to be, you hurt my feelings, is now, you know, I'm traumatized and abused, and it seems like that can really diminish the real, true, like, stories of trauma and abuse. You know,
because
they're
real. I mean, that it's not like those things are not happening. Like,
100%.
It is real, and it is truly heartbreaking, and it is. And so you want to listen, and you want to learn, and you want to be empathetic, and you want to be compassionate, but then you're also kind of like, I just said I want a hot dog, you know, which I would never actually tweet that. But it is funny going back and looking at, you talk about old things you tweeted. Amanda she goes on our Facebook and just look at the memories. It's sort of, you're sort of nostalgic about those kinds of things. And it's a treasure trove of like really great memories and fun moments that we've had. She's always really documented our life and picture. And I've always been an early adopter of social media. And when Facebook first came out, it was just your name, you know, and you wrote some words after it. And so she's like, hey, Steven, did you know that in 2008 you wrote Steven Miller is hungry?
I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Things we used to put on social media.
Yeah.
Stephen Miller is having a delicious salad.
Changing the world one sentence at a time.
Yeah.
When we got onto Twitter, though, early on with Twitter, it was this beautiful art form because you had to find a way to say meaningful, impactful, consequential, hopefully hopeful, encouraging things in 140 characters, which really helped me as a writer to say things with the punch. You know, I think that was the case for a lot of people because I like to talk and it can just go on and on and on forever, as clearly you're noticing. But man, now it's just like the art form of it has sort of gone away, and it's really sad.
I heard the other day, I don't know how much truth there is to this, but I read somewhere the other day that 80% of Twitter accounts are fake.
Whoa.
Like they're like
mean,
the bot accounts or whatever they call them.
Well, that was the whole
Just
thing.
weird. I just think like, what would make a person want to create a robot account on Twitter? Like what's behind that? Like are people monetizing that or like, what is it? Are they trying to destroy the platform so that they can build a new social media platform that overtakes the world? Like
It is wild.
what
Man.
motivates the creation of fake accounts?
I mean, you can easily legitimize yourself or whatever your movement is, you know, whatever the message is that you're trying to get across. Just having hundreds of likes and shares and fake comments, and it's scary. But I imagine, I mean, it broke the sale of Twitter. Apparently, you know,
It did.
So apparently, it's worse than we thought.
So my wife,
whether that's real or not.
My wife went to Ireland with a couple of friends. She's sorry she can't be here. By the way, she works at this place called King's Academy, which is a great school down the road. But so she was unavailable. But we're having a conversation last night about her Ireland trip and my Ireland trip that I took a couple of years ago. And what we noticed over there is if you go into a public place, have you guys ever been there?
Not yet.
Okay, so you go to like a pub or you go to a restaurant, get some fish and chips or whatever, and almost everywhere you go, there's music, like there's live music happening from locals, and it's wonderful, and nobody has their phones out. Like everybody's just present with each other, and we just look at each other like, what would it look like? Like how can we get there, to get to where Ireland is? Like they've been through economic ruin and like all kinds of like sadness around like civil war and all the rest in their history. And maybe that's why they're so untethered to, phones and virtual reality. And, here I am talking to like YouTube stars here, but like you bring you bring a lot of reality and authenticity from what I've been exposed to. Like you're not bringing fake and branding and your highlight reel. You're bringing your lives. Like you're inviting your own kids onto your video and not like editing out or censoring what they say or do, there's, which is refreshing because a lot of times, it's so curated and sometimes the things that people need to know about us more than our highlight reel is where we're struggling. Like, because there's a connection point, like people feel less lonely in the world when somebody's just authentic about, my life is kind of a mixed bag where like I'm happy and I'm depressed. Like I'm kind and I'm kind of a jerk sometimes, and I'm wise and I'm a fool. Like I'm all these things, and I don't know. I think that there's a deficit of that when we behave, more digitally than like the Irish, right? Where we miss out on the diminishment of our own loneliness by being in a real moment with real people and all of the beauty and mess that entails. So I don't know how I got on that rabbit trail, but
well, I think that that's the key to sort of the ending of this cancel culture thing is just actual conversations with actual real life people. They're not words on a text. They're a person that I'm having a beer with, or I'm having a bourbon with, or I'm having a milk or coffee or whatever it is. If you're not into beer or bourbon, I don't know why you wouldn't be, but maybe, but like, it's really hard for me to turn you into some kind of caricature if I'm talking to you and I'm hearing you speak to me. And even just with texting, I mean, how quickly have I texted you sometimes and like you read what I texted you the wrong way, or you
There's
text
no
me
exclamation point. Are you mad at me?
There's no
emoji.
heart
No
emoji.
smiley
There's
face.
no
Is there something going on between us?
It's exactly it. And it's like, how quickly can that happen?
Gosh, boomers are the worst.
Yeah.
They're like, yes,
Yeah.
or no. I'm like,
Okay,
come on,
so
I need more from you than
Fun
that.
story though. When I was working at the Journey where we met, I was working at a church, and I being the guy that I was, I always would start my emails out with, "Hey, how's it going? Hope you had a great weekend. How are the kids?" Just trying to like be nice, whatever. Yeah. I actually got called into the office of one of the pastors to say, "Your emails need to be shorter. They are strictly for information. Just cut all this stuff out. Just one sentence, as short as you can make it." And I was like, "Are you serious? Like, I feel like I'm going to be a jerk, And that was the way that we were taught to communicate. And so then, I think I've kind of not overcorrected back to the other way, but, even like one of my early writing mentors told me, don't use an exclamation point, use a better word, Don't use very. This is back to what's the Robin Williams Dead Poet Society.
Yeah.
Don't use the word very. Like,
man, I like. So I've got a friend of mine. There's a friend of mine who's, kind of in this like writers cohort. I'm not in a writers cohort, but
you're not one of the Inklings.
No. But like, I mean, I fantasize about having an Inklings kind of experience, but like his whole cohort and they're all like published authors, and they're like we're all agreed that no no entire book should ever have more than one exclamation point. And I'm like, man, I've gotten a few things wrong. Man, 'cause every one of my emails has at least 2 or 3 exclamation points, because I don't want people to feel like I'm being cold. You know what I mean? Like,
did you see that meme that was rolling around last week that was like, "I'm going to start this email out with an exclamation point, then follow it with a period, so you know that I'm serious but not crazy." And then and it's
then
like explaining the whole thing. I was like, "This is me. This is the process I go through every time I write something." It's just
but beneath that is your desire to care for people.
Exactly.
And that can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. So I think in the end, as long as we're all still trying to figure out how do we love people better, how do we see them from not for what they've done, but for who they are and whose they are. I mean, whether they're, say they're a Christian or not, like they're still created in the image of God, which is huge and worthy of dignity and worthy of honor. And so I can look at them and say, "Hey, you know what? You may vote differently than me. You may feel differently about a variety of subjects, but you're still a human. You're still made in the image of God, and you're still worthy of of honor and dignity. And I can love you where you are, no matter what your struggle is, no matter what you've done, no matter what you believe, no matter how you feel. How do I love you?" And I think you're doing such a great job of encouraging people to do that. Your book has done it. Your life has done it. You're such an encourager, man. And I'm grateful for you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Likewise.
Hey, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, man. And
pleasure.
Again, we're going to link all the stuff, all the links, all the ways that you can get his book. Audible's great. I love listening to the audiobook, but the hard copy is just as good. So you can check that out. We're going to put all those links in where you can follow him. If you've not already subscribed to What's Up, Beautiful People, the podcast, we'd love for you to do that. You can do that here on the Family Made Network on YouTube, or you can do it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd love for you to do that. We've got the Couple Things show also on the Family Made Network that you guys can check out. Always growing. Got new stuff coming all the time. So we'll see you guys next week. Love you guys.
Hi, guys. Bye.